Hi, I'm Daniel, and over the next few episodes of Daniel's Diner, I will be teaching you how to make gourmet homemade croissants. Now you're probably wondering, Daniel, why make croissants out of everything? Well, to explain that, I'm gonna have to tell a bit of a story. Mr. Mueller's class, sociology, circa maybe November 2019, we were tasked with creating a food that belongs to a culture that we aren't familiar with or associated with. And so me being me, I was like, oh, let me make something really difficult. So I decided I was going to make French-style croissants. And everyone told me, Daniel, you can't do that. And I said, watch me.
Oh my god, he on X Games mode.
And so out of spite, I learned how to make homemade croissants from scratch, and then I served them to my friends for Friendsgiving, and they absolutely loved it. And so basically now I'm a chef. And that's actually how this whole show started. Our first step is preparing the yeast. So first what I'm going to do is I like to put my warm milk in the bowl first. This is about 1.5 cup. And then I do a 1/4 cup of brown sugar packed. Go ahead and throw that in there. And then I need to get 3.25 teaspoons of yeast. Now these little yeast packets come in sizes of 2.25 teaspoons. So I'm going to need to add one and then add 1 teaspoon of another. Get up to a teaspoon, plop that right in, there we go. And now in order to make sure that the yeast activates, I'm actually going to stick this little measuring thing in there, kind of whisk it around, get all the ingredients to interact with each other, break up those clumps of yeast, because once this ends up proving, it's going to be really foamy at the top, and that's what we're looking for. Now, this is about what your yeast should look like once it's proved. If there's still a little bit of yeast flakes left, that's fine. They'll take care of themselves. Now I have this bowl hooked up to my stand mixer, or well, our KitchenAid. And next, the recipe calls for about 3.25 cups of flour to be added in, as well as a tablespoon of salt. So I'm gonna go ahead and lock in the mixer, start it off at about a speed of 1, which is very slow, and then just slowly add in my dough and my salt so that it can go ahead and mix. Add it in a little bit at a time, because you don't want to add it in too fast. Not because it makes the dough bad or anything, but just because it will overwhelm the mixer. And then once you go ahead and get all of your flour in there, then you sit and wait for the dough to work its magic. Now when the dough looks like this, that's how you know you don't have enough flour. It's going to be way too sticky when you try to get it out. So now we're going to turn it off. We're actually going to go ahead and lift the hook and see how it's really not sticking at all. It's like kind of runny. That's when you know you need to add more flour. Now the recipe calls for about up to 4 cups of flour to be added in. So we started off at 3.25, and now to make sure that the dough stays sticky, we need to add flour in 1/4 cup increments. So here I have a 1/4 cup of flour. I'm gonna go ahead and add that in, hope that that's enough, and then start the mixer up again. If it's not enough, I'll just go ahead and add another 1/4 cup. Now, our dough has finished mixing. I ended up adding another 1/4 of a cup of flour to a total of about 3.75 cup of flour. So now I I just floured my workspace, and this dough is really sticky. Look at that. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna plop it down. I'm gonna get the flour, incorporate it in there, and I'm just gonna start kneading the dough until it becomes a little bit more manageable. Okay, so one really nice tip for you guys, there is such a thing as overflowering your workspace, and here is an example of it. right? So at first the dough was really sticky, but then once I got all the flour and this workspace incorporated into it, now any little bits that come off get separated from the dough. You kind of have to like fold them back in and make sure that they get incorporated, or else, you know, that's wasted dough that you're not going to be able to put into your croissants. Also, when you have dough, you see it gets these little like fold-like things when there's too much flour in there. It just means you have a little bit more kneading to do, but it's definitely manageable. Now that our dough is finally kneaded, you know, there's like a little bit of flour on there, but that's fine. You can brush it off. We're gonna go ahead and put it back in our original bowl. See, there's still a little bit of dough left in there. This will catch that. We're gonna go ahead and plop our dough right in there. You can see there's still a bit of like little stragglers here in our workspace, but honestly, that's fine. It's negligible. What we're gonna do is we're gonna cover this in saran wrap and we're gonna stick it in the fridge and let it rest for about an hour. Now, while the dough is chilling and proving, we need to take our butter, because this is what we're gonna do when we fold the croissants. We're gonna use this as a little layer so that it gets those cute little layers when you bake them. Now what we need to do is take this butter and like turn it into a little slab. So you separate them out in 3 butter sticks like this. I believe we got these ones from Costco. They're actually the perfect size for the kind of croissants that we're doing. And what you need to do is take a rolling pin. This is my favorite rolling pin. And then you just whack it, right? All right, now that the butter is smashed, we want to make sure that it's about the same thickness all throughout. And so with that, we're going to take a rolling pin and kind of like you see, like break it up in little areas and try to turn it into a nice big rectangle that we can put in the croissants. And then while you're doing this, you want to feel around for any little holes that you might have made in the saran wrap while you were beating the butter. And then I don't think I made any holes. Whoa, I made no holes in this one. Oh, it's the first time. Thank goodness I got it on camera. Now that we've got a nice little slab going, you can see we need to do this really fast because the butter is already starting to melt. We're gonna take this slab and we're gonna put it in the fridge and we're going to wait for the dough to finish proving, and then we're gonna put it all together and start our folding process. Now, what we're gonna do, we have our nice dough that's been proven. We're gonna go ahead and roll it out into a rectangle that's about 16 by 10 inches, right? So what I'm gonna do first, I'm gonna try to stretch it out with my hands as much as I can. Maybe flip it over, sprinkle that dough off, not that dough, that flour. And then when I gotten as far as I possibly can, I'm gonna take my rolling pin and I'm just gonna go at it and get it to about 16 inches by 10 inches. Sorry, Mrs. Bethard, I don't know any geometry, so I have no frame of reference, but I'm gonna try my best. Now that we got our dough into about this big of a shape, we're going to start the laminating. So we're gonna take our butter, we're gonna take our little butter sheet, and you know, I think it might actually just be easier if we go ahead and plant it right there on the dough. And then, see, it's already starting to melt a little bit, so we need to be really fast and take our saran wrap off. Oh, there we go, right there. Next up, we need to take our dough and our butter and fold it in about 1/3 of the way. Right, so that's our first little fold. And then we're gonna take from the top too and go ahead and do the same thing on the other side, right? So it folds almost like a little envelope right there. And then what we do is we take this whole little sheet and flip it over like this so that we get the short side closest to us. And then we go ahead and we roll again. We're gonna roll it out into a little sheet that's about the same size as the one that we originally started off with, and that will finish off our first fold. Okay, this is the last fold that I'm going to do. Off camera, I did an additional 3 folds. So after this one, I will have a total of 4 folds for these croissants, and basically it's the same process all over again. I roll this out and I try to get another 16 by 10 rectangle. With each fold, you can see those like air bubbles moving around. that's how you, oh, I just farted. That's how you know that the layers are coming out and that they're working. You can also smell the yeast. I think it's called fermentating, or fermenting. So that's how, you know, they're working. It's gonna rise really nicely once we bake them. And now, what I'm doing right now, I'm rolling it out, of course, but I had a ton of flour on the croissants, and I'm putting a ton of flour on the rolling pin because I had a few issues where the dough was actually ripping open and the butter would start pouring out, and now obviously we don't want that. So what I'm doing is I'm constantly keeping it moving. I'm gonna flip it over because, see, you can start to see the butter start to come out. It's not ideal, it shouldn't be happening, but honestly, these are from scratch homemade croissants, so I think there's a little bit of leniency that we can be offered. Now, as I am preparing to get these in another batch of saran wrap, they are going to go in the fridge overnight. Well, I say overnight. I'm currently filming this section at 3 in the morning. But I'm gonna leave them in for about 8 hours, and I will see you guys for part 2 on Wednesday.